So while we've talked about Ron and the Accuser and Captain Marvel and the Inhumans, we have never had a proper discussion about the race of the Kree. And right now seems to be an ample time to do this, simply because of the fact that in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Marvel has come out and said that the alien that had existed in the episode Tahiti was in fact a Kree. And so it seems as though Marvel is bringing the Kree into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so what we're going to do with this video is we're going to talk about things in the chronological order of the Kree. And what that means is that because of the way that Marvel introduces elements, because of different retcons and things like that take place, we're going to find that our discussions in relation to the actual comic books are going to be out of chronological order. And so we'll jump from Captain Marvel Volume 1, issue number 38, and then we'll jump to X-Men Annual, and then we'll jump to about 20 years later to Hickman's run of the Fantastic Four, and so on and so forth. And so we're going to do this in a way where hopefully it makes sense to you guys. Now, what we had seen and something we had previously discussed, especially in our video about Ron and the Accuser, was the origins of the Kree race. And what we had found was that in the history of the Kree, somewhere along the line, they had encountered the Skrulls. And the Skrulls had been traveling across the cosmos in an effort to bring in various races for the purpose of expanding their empire of commerce. And when they came across the Large Magellanic Cloud, the part of the universe which holds the Kree on their home planet of they had encountered two races, the first of which was of course the very primitive Kree, but the other race was the Kotati. And what we had seen with both of these races is that the Skrulls had taken them both to the moon, and they had placed them there with a year's worth of supplies, and they had basically told them to do what it is that they felt was appropriate, to do something, to build something. And so at the end of the year, the Skrulls had come back, and when they did, they found the Kree had built this very elaborate, I guess, citadel of sorts, and the Kotati had built this very lush garden. Now, because the Skrulls at this particular point in time were a very peace-going race, they had decided to ally themselves with the Kotati. And in response to this, the Kree had more or less been very upset. And so what they did is they killed the Skrull delegates, they reverse engineered the Skrull technology, and began to implement a new era of their society. Now, between this point in time and Uncanny X-Men Annual number 11, the Kree had at some point or another created the Supreme Intelligence. And the Supreme Intelligence is basically an amalgamation of all the best minds that have ever existed in the Kree Empire up to that particular point in time. What this means is that the science division had more or less taken the minds, taken the physical brains of previous Kree, and they had connected them into one massive network. And what this allows the Supreme Intelligence to do is to analyze things in a way that any one normal Kree simply couldn't do. It endows the Supreme Intelligence with various forms of telepathy and telekinesis and so on, but more so than that, the Supreme Intelligence is really more of a spiritual force. It's really more of a spiritual leader for the Kree society. Now, with Uncanny X-Men Annual issue number 11, the story itself had revolved around something called the Crystal of Ultimate Vision. And what this crystal did is it more or less put the person that was trying to capture it through a test. It would endow its user, the person that was wielding it, with virtually godlike power. But the downside here is that if the person chooses to use the crystal, then the person will be killed. It will become a guardian for the Crystal of Ultimate Vision, and that individual's race will be frozen in time with regards to its evolution. Now, it's not until the very end of the story that we learn this is actually what happened with the Kree, that at some point along the line, a member of the Kree had tried to capture the Crystal of Ultimate Vision, and when they did, the entire evolution of the Kree race had been frozen, and it wasn't able to move forward anymore. And it lasted this way for some unspecified amount of time. Again, we don't know exactly when this happened. We simply know that it was just something that took place. But from here, we jump again to the future with Hickman's run of the Fantastic Four with issue number 6 and the story of the Two Kings. And what Hickman tells us in this story is that, again, somewhere along the line, without giving us an exact date, that the Supreme Intelligence had initiated something called the Metagenesis Project. And what this was the Kree Empire going about the process of seeding different planets with, I guess, the genes of the Kree within the existing people, within the existing society. And to make this a very simple example, we're going to go with the Inhumans. And what the Kree had done is they had traveled to the planet Earth, and they had abducted several of the indigenous species, Homo sapiens at the time, and they had implanted in them or planted in them the seeds of Kree. But what happened here is that once these, these people, these groups were exposed to something called the Terrigen Mist, they would in turn take on a multitude of different forms. Now, we won't find out later on until why this was done, but what the Supreme Intelligence realizes is that somewhere off in the distant future, there's going to be a situation whereby one member of this race, or possibly an entire race, is going to rise up against the Kree Empire. It was more or less a prophecy that had been foretold. And so what the Supreme Intelligence did was order the Accuser Corps to eliminate the scientists who had been the push behind the entire Metagenesis project, as well as eliminate all the Metagenesis test subjects. Now, of course, we know they weren't successful when it got around to the Inhumans. Of course, the Inhumans were able to survive this great purge, and as a result, they were able to continue their evolution and move towards their current state. But from here, we jump to Avengers Volume 1, issue number 347. And what this is part of an event called Operation Galactic Storm. And with Operation Galactic Storm, this was a situation whereby the Kree and the Shi'ar had engaged in war with one another. Now, over the course of the conflict, over the course of the series, we of course see various things taking place, and we see this big crossover playing itself out. But with issue number 347, what we see is that the Shi'ar Empire detonates something called the Negabomb. And what we had seen here was that this story had been played out, had more or less been instigated by the Supreme Intelligence. The Supreme Intelligence had basically instigated a conflict with the Shi'ar, knowing that eventually the Shi'ar was going to use the Negabomb. And when they did, it was going to wipe out 98% of the Kree population. But what this would do is force the Kree population to evolve. It would basically jumpstart the evolutionary stagnation they were previously in and allow the race to begin moving toward its toward its evolutionary end. And so from here we jump to Avengers Volume 3, issue number 35, with Maximum Security. And what Maximum Security tells us is it introduces us to the next stage of the Kree evolution, when we're introduced to a race called the Ruul. And this is the very interesting thing when it comes to the Kree. With the Kree society itself, you have the blue-skinned Kree. You have those Kree who look almost exactly like humans, with the exception of the fact that they may be a little bit larger in their physical size, their bodies are more dense, and so they're physically stronger, they're immune to the kind of diseases that humans are not immune to. But among the Kree Empire, you also have pink-skinned Kree. And the pink-skinned Kree are the Kree who have chosen to procreate with races outside of the Kree. And so these pink-skinned Kree are looked down upon. They are a lesser class than their blue-skinned counterparts. But because of the detonation of the Negabomb, and because of the fact that 98% of the Kree were killed, while some of the Kree remained, they maintained their physical form in terms of their blue skin, that this new race of the Kree were vastly different. But what the Supreme Intelligence tells us is that this new race of Kree is able to demonstrate its evolutionary, progress, in the sense that they can physically adapt themselves to any situation. If they need to fly, they can develop wings. If they need to breathe underwater, they can develop the physiology to do so. And so this is why the Supreme Intelligence looks at the Ruul and says that the Ruul are more or less better than the normal blue-skinned Kree. However, for the most part, the blue-skinned Kree still maintain the hierarchical control of the Kree Empire. Now from here, we jump to Inhumans Volume 3. And what we had seen with this 4-issue limited run was that the Shi'ar Empire is still under control, or is still controlling the Kree Empire as a result of the events of Operation Galactic Storm. And so what Ruul and the Accuser is looking to do here is he is looking to find a way to force the Inhumans to operate under the control of the Kree. And this is when we learn the basis behind the formation of the Inhumans. What Ruul and the Accuser tells us here is that when the Metagenesis project was conceived, it was designed in such a way so that the Kree, once they took on their final form, once they were exposed to the Terrigen Mist, or the equivalent of the Terrigen Mist on whatever other planet it happened to be on, that they would go through a physical change. They would literally change their physical form. And when they did, they would take on the form of another race. And what this would allow the Kree to do is to use this individual to infiltrate that race and to perhaps overthrow that the ruling empire of that planet or of that total society, maybe assassinate someone, but it would allow the Kree to gain an upper edge. It was basically a giant espionage project. And so what we had seen was that when Ruul and the Accuser had realized that the Inhumans Inhumans had survived the Great Purge, he was looking to take the Inhumans and force them into servitude, and then force them to infiltrate the Shi'ar Empire and attempt to overthrow the Shi'ar Empire. But what we saw was that Black Bolt had refused this. Black Bolt had refused to play the schemes, to play out the role that Ronan the Accuser was trying to impose on him. And so what he did is he challenged Ronan the Accuser to a deal, to a duel. And he had told Ronan the Accuser that if Ronan wins, then the Inhumans will take on the role that Ronan the Accuser is trying to force on them. They will operate as agents of the Kree Empire. But if Black Bolt wins, Black Bolt will take over the role as king, as a ruler of the Kree, and Ronan the Accuser will step down. Of course, we see that Black Bolt is successful in defeating Ronan the Accuser, and as a result, Black Bolt becomes king. But what Black Bolt does is he travels back to the planet Earth, to his to Attilan, and he leaves Ronan the Accuser to function as king in his stead. And so from here, we jump to the Annihilation storyline. And with the Annihilation storyline, what we see is actually a limited series, I believe a 4 or 5 part limited series for Ronan the Accuser. And what we learn is that somewhere along the line, again, a group called the Fiero House had taken over control of the Kree Empire. And when they did, they had banished Ronan the Accuser under the guise that he was a traitor, which of course false testimony was given at the hands of Tananile. And so during the entire Annihilation event, whereby Annihilus is attempting to take over and eliminate all life in the mainstream Marvel universe, Ronan the Accuser is trying to find out what happened with regards to his to the accusations, with regards to the success of the Fiero House taking over the Kree Empire. Eventually, Ronan the Accuser is able to find out what happened. He's able to kill the head of the Fiero House who had accused him of treason, but in the process, the Supreme Intelligence is rendered lobotomized, and as a result, the Supreme Intelligence is no longer able to function as the spiritual leader of the Kree Empire. And so Ronan the Accuser destroys the tank that the Supreme Intelligence was housed in, thereby killing the Supreme Intelligence entirely. Now, the Supreme Intelligence will come back during the Annihilation Conquest storyline, and especially after the Annihilation Conquest storyline, but for the most part, the Supreme Intelligence doesn't maintain the same role that he previously did, in the sense that there's a little bit of distrust here. There's a little bit of acknowledgement on behalf of the Kree that the Supreme Intelligence, despite his vast intelligence, his capabilities, can still be rendered almost non-existent, can still be killed off, or at the very least removed from the equation. But for the sake of this discussion, we're going to go ahead and bring this video to an end. We're not going to get too in-depth with regards to a lot of those future stories, because those are things that we'll get into with later videos. But with that being said, I hope this explanation made sense to you guys. I hope it was explained in a way that you guys were able to piece it together, to at the very least come to an understanding of what the Kree are about. And of course, if you have any questions, I'll answer them in the comments section. With that being said, I will catch you guys later. Peace.